The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched them from across the room. My daughter's new in-laws, the prestigious Harrington family, huddled together in their designer outfits, stealing glances at me between their muffled laughter. I'd caught snippets of their conversation earlier. Did you hear how she says coffee? God, that accent is atrocious. Where did Rebecca even find her mother? My daughter Rebecca stood among them, her smile strained as she pretended not to notice what was happening. Her new husband James placed a protective arm around her waist, but he didn't intervene either. I smoothed down my dress, the most expensive one I'd ever purchased, and tried to swallow the burning knot in my throat. The engagement party was being held at the Bellevue, the most exclusive venue in the city. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, illuminating marble floors that reflected the elite crowd like mirrors. I didn't belong here. My weathered hands and the slight stoop in my shoulders from decades of hard work gave me away as surely as my southern drawl. Mrs. Eleanor Harrington, James's mother, approached me with two friends in tow. Her pearls gleamed under the chandelier light, her silver blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. "Margaret, isn't it?" she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We were just discussing the venue. Such a quaint choice. Though I suppose Rebecca didn't have many options with your connections." She emphasized the word connections with a slight curl of her lip. Before I could respond, a waiter appeared at my elbow. "Ms. Sullivan, Mr. Donovan asked if you could join him in his office. He said it's about the arrangements." Eleanor's eyebrows arched with curiosity as I excused myself. I could feel her gaze burning into my back as I followed the waiter through a discreet door behind the main hall, down a corridor lined with photographs of celebrities and dignitaries who had visited the Bellevue over the years. The waiter opened a heavy oak door, revealing a handsomely appointed office where Thomas Donovan, owner of the Bellevue and 5 other luxury properties across the country, stood waiting. His face broke into a genuine smile when he saw me. "Maggie," he said, his voice warm with familiarity. "I saw what was happening out there. Are you all right?" I let out a shaky breath. "I'm fine, Tommy." He crossed the room and took my hands in his. "Those people have no idea who they're dealing with, do they?" "No," I said quietly. "And that's exactly how I wanted it." Thomas shook his head. "Well, I think it's time they learned." I looked up at the man who had been my closest friend for over 40 years. The man who had once been my husband, before life tore us apart and brought us back together in ways neither of us could have imagined. "Tommy," I warned, "this is Rebecca's night." "And you're Rebecca's mother," he countered. "Our daughter deserves better than watching her mother be humiliated." I closed my eyes, memories washing over me like waves. How had we come to this moment? The journey had been so long, so painful, and yet somehow we were here, standing in a room that represented everything we'd built from nothing. Growing up in rural Georgia, I'd never imagined a life beyond the small farm where my family had lived for generations. My daddy worked the land while Mama taught at the local school. We weren't poor by local standards, but we certainly weren't rich. What we lacked in money, though, we made up for in love and determination. I met Thomas Donovan during my sophomore year at the state college, a scholarship student studying business while working evenings as a waitress. Tommy was different from the other boys. He didn't come from money either. His father was a mechanic in a small town 3 counties over. But Tommy had dreams bigger than our small town backgrounds. He talked about skyscrapers and investments, about building something from nothing. We fell in love quickly, deeply. Married at 22, we moved to Atlanta with nothing but our degrees and a shared vision. Rebecca came along 2 years later, our beautiful, perfect daughter. Those early years were hard but happy. Tommy worked for a real estate development company, while I took accounting jobs that allowed me to be home with Rebecca. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. Tommy's company was sending him to New York to oversee a major project, a 6-month assignment that could lead to a promotion. We decided he should go alone first, establish himself, and then Rebecca and I would follow. Those 6 months stretched into a year. Tommy's calls became less frequent, his visits home rare. When I finally took Rebecca to visit him in New York, I hardly recognized the man who met us at the airport. Designer suit, new haircut, a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He'd been transformed by the city, by his success. I'm not coming back to Atlanta, Maggie, he told me over dinner in his sleek Manhattan apartment while 4-year-old Rebecca slept in the next room. There's nothing for me there. You and Rebecca should move here. But it wasn't just about location. The Tommy I knew, the one who held me close at night and whispered about our shared dreams, had disappeared. This new Thomas Donovan moved in elite circles, spoke a language of wealth and status I couldn't understand. I can't raise our daughter here, I said. And I don't think you want us to, not really. The divorce was quiet, civilized on paper. The reality was messier. Rebecca's tears, my broken heart, Tommy's increasing absence from our lives. He paid child support, made occasional visits, sent expensive gifts on birthdays and Christmas. But he wasn't a father in the ways that mattered most. I rebuilt my life in Atlanta, took night classes to earn my CPA license, moved us to a better neighborhood, made sure Rebecca had everything she needed, even if we couldn't afford everything she wanted. I preserved Tommy in her eyes, never speaking ill of him, keeping my own pain private. As Rebecca grew, she began to idolize her absent father. The glamorous life he led in New York seemed far more exciting than our modest existence in Atlanta. When she was 16, she asked to spend summers with him. I agreed, even though each time she returned, she seemed more distant, more critical of our life together. Mom, why don't you try to speak more professionally? She asked once after returning from a summer in New York. Dad says my accent makes me sound uneducated, and yours is even stronger. Each comment was a small dagger, but I smiled through the pain. This is who I am, sweetheart. These roots run deep. Rebecca chose an Ivy League college, paid for by her father, of course. She studied art history, traveled to Europe, and eventually settled in New York. Our relationship became a series of holiday visits and weekly phone calls that grew increasingly shorter. She was building a life in her father's world, a world where I remained an outsider. Then came the call that changed everything again. Thomas, had suffered a heart attack. Serious, but not fatal. I flew to New York immediately, not for him, but for Rebecca, who sounded terrified over the phone. The hospital room was filled with flowers from business associates. Rebecca sat by her father's bedside, looking exhausted. Thomas looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in the hospital bed. Maggie, he said when he saw me, his voice hoarse. You came. Of course I came. Rebecca needed me. That hospital visit stretched into weeks as Thomas recovered. Something shifted between us during that time. The arrogance had been scared out of him, and glimpses of my Tommy began to emerge. We talked, really talked, for the first time in decades, about regrets, about Rebecca, about the paths we'd chosen. I built an empire, he told me one afternoon when Rebecca had stepped out. But I lost the only things that really mattered. His recovery was slow. When it was time for him to be discharged, he faced a dilemma. His penthouse had too many stairs, and he needed someone to help during his recovery. Rebecca had her job, her own life. Come stay at my hotel, he suggested. I own the place after all. You can have the best suite, and I'll be in the one next door, just until I'm back on my feet. I hesitated, but Rebecca pleaded with me. Please, Mom, I can't take care of him, and I don't trust anyone else. So I agreed. 2 weeks, I told myself, just long enough to help him establish a routine with his new medications and dietary restrictions. 2 weeks turned into a month into 3. Thomas and I fell into a comfortable rhythm. He showed me New York, not the glittering surface I'd glimpsed years ago, but the real city, with its neighborhoods and parks and hidden gems. I helped him rebuild his strength, manage his business from a distance, reconnect with Rebecca in more meaningful ways. I never stopped loving you, he confessed one evening, as we sat on the balcony of his hotel suite, the city lights spread before us like fallen stars. I just forgot how to show it. I didn't move back to New York permanently. My life, my accounting practice, my friends were in Atlanta. But Thomas and I found a new way forward, a long-distance relationship built on older, wiser versions of ourselves. He visited Atlanta regularly. I came to New York. We vacationed together. We became partners again, in a different way. When Rebecca met James Harrington at a gallery opening, Thomas was immediately suspicious. Old money, he said dismissively. Those families think their bloodlines make them special. I was more optimistic. He seems to make her happy, that's what matters. The Harringtons, however, made their feelings clear from the first time they met Rebecca. She wasn't from their world. Her father might be wealthy now, but he was new money, a distinction they considered crucial. And her mother, well, I was barely acknowledged during that first dinner at their Connecticut estate. When James proposed and Rebecca accepted, the battle lines were subtly drawn. The Harringtons wanted a society wedding at their country club. Thomas wanted to showcase one of his luxury properties. Rebecca, caught in the middle, tried to please everyone. The engagement party will be at Dad's new acquisition, the Bellevue, she told me over the phone. The Harringtons agreed since it's such a prestigious venue. They don't know it's Dad's, though. He bought it through one of his holding companies. Are you sure that's wise, honey? I asked. Starting with a secret? It's not really a secret, she insisted. It just hasn't come up. And anyway, the wedding will be at their country club, so this is the compromise. I should have known better, should have insisted on transparency, but I wanted Rebecca's happiness more than anything. Which led to tonight, standing in Thomas's office at the Bellevue, while the Harringtons mocked my accent and background, unaware that the country bumpkin they were ridiculing was the mother of the bride and the former wife of the man who owned the very ground beneath their designer shoes. Tommy, I said now, placing a hand on his arm, let's not make a scene. His eyes softened. Maggie Sullivan, after all these years, you're still the most gracious woman I've ever known. He covered my hand with his. But sometimes, grace needs a little help from justice. He pressed a button on his desk. Could you ask the Harrington party to join us in my office, please, and Rebecca and James as well? My heart pounded as we waited. What was Tommy planning? The door opened, and Eleanor Harrington swept in, followed by her husband Richard and their two other children. Rebecca and James entered last, confusion evident on their faces. Mr. Donovan, Eleanor said, extending her hand. How kind of you to meet with us. I was just telling my husband what a lovely venue you have here. Thomas didn't take her hand. Mrs. Harrington, I understand you've been enjoying the party. Oh, absolutely, she gushed. Everything is exquisite. And I understand you've also been enjoying yourselves at Margaret's expense. The room went silent. Eleanor's smile froze, then faltered. I don't know what you mean, she said stiffly. Thomas's voice remained calm, but I could hear the steel beneath. Let me be clear. Margaret Sullivan is not only Rebecca's mother. She's also my former wife, my closest friend, and the wisest business partner I've ever had. Every major acquisition I've made in the past 15 years, including this venue, has been vetted by her first. Eleanor's face paled. Richard Harrington stepped forward. Now see here. No, you see here, Thomas interrupted. Your family has wealth that goes back generations. Congratulations. Margaret and I built something from nothing. We worked for everything we have, and what we have, Mr. Harrington, is considerably more than what you have. Rebecca moved to my side, taking my hand. Mom, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I heard what they said earlier. I should have said something. I squeezed her hand. It's all right, sweetheart. Thomas wasn't finished. The Bellevue is just one of my properties. I also own the building that houses your law firm, Richard, and the summer camp where your youngest attends each year, and I'm a major investor in the tech company that employs your daughter. The Harringtons looked stunned. James stepped forward, placing himself between his parents and us. Mr. Donovan, Mrs. Sullivan, he said formally, I want to apologize for my family's behavior. It was inexcusable. He turned to face his parents. And it stops now. I love Rebecca. I'm going to marry her, and that means her family is my family. Eleanor looked like she'd swallowed something sour. Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. James, his mother hissed. You can't possibly. I can and I will, he said firmly. Dad always taught me to judge people by their character, not their background. Somewhere along the way, you both seem to have forgotten that lesson. I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps James was different from his parents after all. Thomas moved to stand beside me, his shoulder touching mine in a gesture of solidarity. Now, we have two choices. We can all return to the party and celebrate Rebecca and James's engagement with the respect and joy it deserves. Or we can end the evening now and reconsider whether this union is in everyone's best interest. Eleanor looked at her husband, then at her son. Something in James's expression must have reached her, because her shoulders sagged slightly. Of course we'll continue the celebration, she said, her voice strained but controlled. And I apologize for any misunderstanding. It wasn't a real apology, but it was a start. As the Harringtons filed out, Rebecca hugged me tightly. I'm so proud to be your daughter, she whispered. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel otherwise. James approached us next, extending his hand to Thomas, then turning to me. Mrs. Sullivan, he said, I hope you'll give me the chance to prove I'm nothing like what you saw tonight. I studied his face, earnest, a little frightened, but sincere. I believe you already started to, I said, my accent rolling out without any attempt to hide it. After they left, Thomas and I remained in the office, the weight of the confrontation settling around us. Was that too much? He asked, suddenly uncertain. I shook my head. It was exactly enough. He smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in the way I'd always loved. Shall we go back out there and show them how it's done? Together, I agreed, taking his offered arm. As we walked back toward the ballroom, I thought about the long road that had brought us here, the heartbreak and healing, the separate paths that somehow led back to each other, the daughter we both loved, now building her own complicated path forward. The engagement party continued with a new undercurrent of tension, but also possibility. Eleanor Harrington made a point of introducing me to several of her friends, her smile tight, but her words carefully respectful. Richard engaged Thomas in conversation about business opportunities. Small steps, perhaps, but steps nonetheless. Near midnight, as the party began to wind down, I found myself alone on the terrace, gazing out at the city lights. Rebecca joined me, leaning her head on my shoulder like she used to do as a little girl. I didn't know, she said softly, about you and Dad, that you were working together all these years. We didn't advertise it, I replied. It was easier that way. She was quiet for a moment. Are you back together? I considered the question. We're together in all the ways that matter. The labels aren't important anymore. I wish I'd appreciated you more, she said, her voice thick with emotion. All those years when it was just you and me. You never complained, never badmouthed Dad, never made me feel like I was a burden. You were never a burden, Rebecca. You were my joy. She straightened, wiping away a tear. The wedding plans. I want to change them. I don't want it at the Harringtons Country Club. I want somewhere that honors both families, both histories. Are you sure? James might. It was James's idea, she interrupted. He suggested we have it at Grandma and Grandpa Sullivan's farm in Georgia. If that's still in the family? My heart swelled. The old farmhouse and its surrounding acres, I'd kept it all these years, unable to part with my roots even as I built a new life. It is, but it's not fancy, honey. Not like what the Harringtons are used to. That's the point, she said firmly. I want them to see where I come from, all of where I come from. Thomas appeared in the doorway, his silhouette familiar and dear. Everything all right out here? Rebecca went to him, hugging him tightly. Everything's perfect, Dad. I was just telling Mom about the change of wedding venue. He raised an eyebrow at me over her head. Change? We're going to Georgia, I said, my voice steady and sure. Back to where it all began. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of my childhood home, watching workers transform the old barn into a wedding venue. Thomas came up beside me, handing me a glass of sweet tea. Your daddy would be proud, he said, surveying the activity, seeing his land host such a gathering. He'd be suspicious of all these fancy city folks invading his space, I corrected with a laugh. True, but he'd be proud of you, Maggie. I know I am. The Harringtons had arrived the previous day, staying in the best hotel the nearby town had to offer. To my surprise, they'd been making genuine efforts to bridge the divide. Eleanor had even asked for my mother's recipe for peach cobbler, though I suspected the request was more diplomatic than culinary. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. Rebecca was radiant as she prepared in my old bedroom, her designer gown a stark contrast to the simple furnishings. James and his groomsmen gathered on the porch, looking only slightly out of place in their tuxedos. As guests arrived, a mix of New York society, Thomas's business associates, and my lifelong friends from Georgia, I watched worlds collide and then, surprisingly, blend. Eleanor Harrington found herself deep in conversation with my childhood friend Sarah, who now ran the local library. Richard discovered a shared passion for fishing with my cousin Bill. The ceremony itself was held under the ancient oak tree where Thomas and I had once carved our initials as teenagers. Rebecca walked down the aisle on both our arms, Thomas on her right, me on her left. A symbol of reconciliation, of family redefined and rebuilt. During the reception, Thomas clinked his glass for attention. The crowd quieted as he stood. "Many of you know me as Thomas Donovan, the businessman," he began. "But here, in this place, I'm just Tommy, the boy who fell in love with the smartest, strongest, most beautiful girl in Georgia." He looked at me, his eyes shining. "Maggie and I took different paths for a while, but those paths led us right back where we belong, together." He raised his glass. "To Rebecca and James, may you learn faster than we did that love isn't about changing who you are or where you're from. It's about finding someone who sees all of you, roots, accent, and all, and loves every bit." As the celebration continued into the night, Thomas pulled me onto the dance floor. We swayed together under strings of lights that transformed the old barn into something magical. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his cheek against my hair. "About journeys," I said. "About how sometimes the longest way around is the shortest way home." He pulled back slightly to look at me, his expression tender. "Are you home, Maggie? Really home?" I glanced around at the farm where I grew up, at our daughter dancing with her new husband, at the unlikely gathering of people from every chapter of our lives. Then I looked back at Thomas, at Tommy, my first love, my partner, my friend. "I am now," I said, my Georgia accent strong and proud. "I surely am." 3 years later, I sit on that same porch, a small bundle in my arms. Rebecca and James's daughter, Margaret Eleanor Harrington Sullivan, named for both her grandmothers. They live in New York, but visit often. The old farmhouse has become a gathering place, a bridge between worlds. Eleanor Harrington sits across from me in a rocking chair, watching as I sing a soft lullaby to our shared granddaughter. My accent rolls out, unhurried and unaltered, as natural as the breeze through the oak trees. "You have a beautiful singing voice, Margaret," Eleanor says, surprising me. "Little Maggie seems to respond to it." "Thank you," I reply. "My mama used to sing this same song to me." Eleanor hesitates, then asks, "Would you teach it to me, for when they visit us in Connecticut?" I look at her, really look at her. The perfectly coiffed hair, the designer casual wear that probably cost more than a month's income for most people in this county. But I also see something new. Humility, genuine interest, the shared love of a grandchild. "I'd be happy to," I say. Inside the house, I can hear Thomas and Richard arguing good-naturedly about baseball. Rebecca and James are in the kitchen, preparing dinner together. Worlds merging, differences acknowledged, but no longer divisive. As I begin to teach Eleanor the old Georgia lullaby, I think about all the twists and turns that brought us here. The hurts and healings, the separations and reunions, the misunderstandings and moments of perfect clarity. Life isn't a straight line from beginning to end. It's a winding path with unexpected detours, painful setbacks, and surprising second chances. What matters isn't the path itself, but who walks beside you, who waits for you around the bend, who helps you find your way when you're lost. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the journey brings you right back where you started, but with new eyes to see the beauty that was there all along.